This podcast is brought to you by Most Valuable Podcasts, leading the league in podcasting entertainment.
What's up, real MVPs, Ricky Widmer here, along with the one, the only, Brandon Swanson.
Hey.
And we are back for another edition of the Primetime Podcast right here on Most Valuable Podcast, your one-stop shop for everything college football and college basketball. And before we start the show, as you may have seen on Twitter, I know that I've hyped it up on past podcasts. Originally, we're calling an audible here at the line. Literally, Brandon and I got to the line of scrimmage. I called out the Mike linebacker. I said, hey, Brandon, you got to go block him. No, got to block this guy. We're literally calling an audible at the line. And the NBA big board that we had planned to do today, we've actually decided we're going to push that. So that is going to be in 2 weeks' time, I think, or 3 weeks. November 26th is the night we are going to record that. So just after Thanksgiving, we're going to move the big board back so we can see a couple games, see how these guys play. Because like I was telling you, Brandon, most of the film that I could watch, because most of these guys are freshmen, it's either high school or that one game against that D2 team. Like for Zion Williamson, RJ Barrett, and Cam Reddish, like it's really fair judging these guys on how they play against Ferris State. When they were up, 40-7 at one point in that game? It was ridiculous. So we're going to move that a little bit. We're going to focus back on football because we got some stuff that we got to hit in football. We're going to look at the Big Ten. Should Ohio State be worried about Michigan? We're going to go Big 12. West Virginia getting the dub against Tejas. Can they win the Big 12 and get into the playoffs because of which? And then we're going to take a look at some college coaching hot seats. Which head coaches are on the hottest of seats? Which ones could be getting hot as the season nears to an end? And then we'll end the podcast making our picks for Week 11 in college football. Before we get started, a little bit of housekeeping. Make sure to check out patreon.com/Most Valuable Podcast. If you want to join the channel, you can support us at the $10 tier. You can join a podcast. I said join the channel. I meant join a podcast. Come on for a segment. We talk about what you want to talk about every month. You are at that $10 tier. Also, you can go get yourself an MVP t-shirt that is down below in the description, or you can get it at mostvaluablepodcast.com, where you can get your MVP each and every day. And then last but not least, make sure to give us a good rating on iTunes, please. I would like a 5-star rating if you please, but rate us however you feel. Let us know how you feel. I have not checked the ratings, but I will do that at the end of the podcast like I usually do here on the Primetime Podcast. But Brandon, let's get into it, and we're going to talk about a little Big Ten football to start, because this weekend I was kind of watching both games in the Big Ten. I was watching Nebraska, Ohio State, but then there was also Penn State and Michigan going on. And on one side, Ohio State was in a closer game than I anticipated against a team that only had one win. And then on the other side, you had Michigan completely dominating a ranked opponent in the Big Ten. So here's the thing I want to ask you. I know I'm overreacting because Ohio State, the last two games haven't been good. For Michigan, the last two games, especially defensively, they've only given up a combined 14. They're averaging 7 opponent points per game in the last two. I want to ask you, though, should Ohio State be worried about the Michigan Wolverines?
I think they should be. The last 2 weeks combined, the Ohio State Buckeyes have given up 80 points. Mm-hmm. It took 5 games to get into the season for them to give up 80 points. Mm-hmm. Right now, their defense is not very good. As the head coach Urban Meyer said, we're really being, we're vulnerable. Mm-hmm. People are finding out how to, play against us, and they're finding the weaknesses in our defense, and they
were exposed against Purdue
and exposing us. I think those are things that you do not want to hear, especially at this point in the season. Against Nebraska, Ohio State fumbled 6 times. Mm-hmm. They lost 2 of them. This is a Nebraska team that has not been very good all season long, but they're starting to get a little bit more inspired the last couple of weeks as Nebraska, and that's good for them, but bad for teams like Ohio State. But with Ohio State, it's where's your focus? Where's your focus right now? You're a team that still potentially in the Big Ten run, potentially in the playoff run, and you're not playing your best football. Michigan in the Big Ten run, in the college football playoff run, they're playing some of their best football. You look at what they did this past weekend. I said I thought the game would be close. The game wasn't close, not one bit.
It's funny because in the comment section of that video where we talked Penn State and Michigan, there was a commenter that was like, guys, you're giving the Nittany Lions too much credit, which, first off, I want to say to that, if we didn't give them any credit, the entire segment would have been, so Brandon, can the Nittany Lions upset the Wolverines? Nope. All right, next segment. Like, obviously, we're going to talk about it. We're going to look at both teams. But, I mean, looking at that comment, the game showed, yeah, Penn State did not deserve to be in that game. Like, Michigan was on a whole nother level. And actually, the past 2 weeks, I know that the Michigan State game kind of gets an asterisk because that was like a tough fought out one. It was like 0-0 for the longest time, and it was only a 21-7 game. But I feel like these teams, maybe it's because Michigan lost week 1 to Notre Dame, but I feel like these teams started off opposite. Michigan a little shaky, Ohio State rolling. And as we've gone through the season, these teams have then switched, where now Michigan is rolling and Ohio State is kind of struggling and being like, oh, what are we going to do? And for Ohio State, I don't know if I want to say they should be worried about Michigan because there are good things going into that game. A, it's going to be in Columbus at the Horseshoe. B, there's going to be pressure on Jim Harbaugh. He has never beaten you since he has gone to Michigan. So there are going to be things in your favor. However, I look at it, and the one thing I would be worried about if I was a Buckeye fan, we're playing our worst football at the possible worst time of the season. Like, usually we can get away with playing bad at the start and then getting good. Usually it's bad news bears if teams start out really good and then get bad or get tough, especially around this time. Lose a game here, struggle here. This is not the time of the year where you want to have your struggles.
Michigan is hitting their stride at the right time. Michigan's one loss this season, and of course Ohio State has one loss, but that came 2 weeks ago, and it was a conference loss. It was against Purdue, and in the worst way. I mean, complete blowout loss. Michigan's one loss. It was to Notre Dame on the road at Notre Dame in week 1. Since then, Michigan handled Nebraska easily, 56-10, and I know that's at the beginning of the season, but they handled them easily. They went on the road at Northwestern. They beat a ranked Wisconsin 38-13, a ranked Michigan State 21-7, and a ranked Penn State 42-7. This is a team right now, Michigan. They seem to be really hitting their stride at the absolute best possible time. Karan Higdon with another 100-yard rushing game, over 130 yards he had. This is a team right now where Shea Patterson seems to be doing all the right things at the quarterback position and having a running game that is so consistent, so good, where you take the field and you can almost bet that Karan Higdon is going to have 100-plus yards. That's outstanding. If you're able to do that, you really can control the game in a number of ways, because that opens up the passing game. That makes things it takes pressure off of your quarterback, makes things a little bit easier in terms of what offensive play calls you're going to go with and what you can do offensively. And then defensively, your defense gets to rest a little bit, because if you're taking off large chunks of yardage and you're keeping your offense out there for a good part of the time for long drives and extending those drives, your defense is going to be well rested, be able to come back onto the field feeling pretty good. That's what Michigan could be doing against Ohio State when they meet them in the final game of the season here just in a couple of weeks. This is going to be a good game. This is not going to be one of those games where it was a Penn State where we talked about and said, oh, both teams have a chance, but looking more so on one side. I think right now we're looking at both teams very much do have a chance, and both teams will know exactly what is on the line, and it's going to be plenty. It's going to be a big game.
So I got a question for you, but before I ask you that question, let me set the table. Thanksgiving dinner, let me set the table for you. And if you look at the next two games for both teams, first off with Michigan, I expect them to take care of business. They're going to take care of business against Rutgers in 2 weeks. They're going to take care of Rutgers, or they're going to take care of Indiana in 3 weeks. I don't think Michigan loses another game before that Ohio State game. The thing that I'm wondering is I look at Ohio State's next two. You look at the games they've already played. They lose at Purdue, and at home, they struggle. I'm going to say struggle against the Nebraska. Yeah, they looked better towards the end, but I was shocked that Nebraska was up 7-0 early on. Let's just put it at that. The next two that they play after taking, or is it next week or is it this week? I'm looking. I was wrong. Michigan plays Rutgers this week. I forgot that this week is the 10th. Where Michigan State, you're going on the road if you're Ohio State. I have a feeling that the chance is higher that Ohio State loses one of their next two compared to Michigan. And I want to ask you, in your mind, is there any reasonable chance that you see Ohio State getting upset by either at Michigan State or at Maryland, two teams that can play them tough on the road, which we already saw before. If a team plays them well in their own stadium, turned off my mic there, they can expose them. So I'm going to ask you, is there a viable chance that either the Spartans or the Terrapins can upset Michigan State these next 2 weeks? And then I'm saying make that Michigan game obsolete. Although for Michigan and Ohio State fans, it's never going to be obsolete.
You're right. It never will be. I don't see a viable chance that either Michigan State or Maryland is able to knock off the Buckeyes. I just don't see that happening. After what's happened the last 2 weeks, you lose on the road to Purdue. You're embarrassed 49-20. Mm-hmm. You get the win against Nebraska, but it doesn't feel good. Mm-hmm. You fumble it 6 times. You fumble the ball 6 times. You lose it twice. Urban Meyer has got to be irked, completely irked. I mean, if they would have lost that Nebraska game, Urban Meyer would have definitely been considering his thoughts on retirement and his comments on retirement. Now, I'm not going to retire at the end of the season, loses to Nebraska. You know what? I have thought about it. I do believe I will be retiring at the end of the year. I mean, I could have seen that coming out after the season if they lost to Nebraska, because the season would have been over. It would have been really, really bad for the Buckeyes. But now this is where they get focused. This is where they get focused. They have not been focused the last 2 weeks. It certainly does not seem like that. You are in practice. Biggest thing, take care of the football. It's the biggest thing that they'll work on in practice this week. Holding the football, securing the football, taping it up, keeping the football in your hands, not giving it away. Mm-hmm. That's going to be number one. Number two, it's going to get back to some of the fundamentals, because it just doesn't seem like the last couple of weeks Dwayne Haskins has been all that comfortable. Yes, he'll still put up his big yards and stuff like that and throw for multiple touchdowns, but he threw an interception this week. He didn't seem quite comfortable. He was only sacked 1 time, but it just didn't seem like it and it certainly wasn't one of his best games on the season. Mm-hmm. That's what they're going to focus on a little bit more. I think they'll focus on making things shoring things up on the offensive line, making things better there. I think they'll look at what they can do differently to get back to where they were when they were rolling in their first 7 games of the season, and try and repeat that and duplicate that. If they can do that, they will not lose to Michigan State or Maryland, not even though that they're both road games. Mm-hmm. And this, people will look and say, well, this Michigan State team, they really have nothing to lose. They're ranked number 24 right now. They're not going to the playoffs. They're just trying to play spoiler. Mm-hmm. That they might be. I just don't think Ohio State is going to fall into that trap. Ohio State has lost their spoil upset game this year. Clemson has one almost every season. Doesn't look like they're going to be having it this year. It would have been earlier against Syracuse, but it didn't end up happening. Mm-hmm. This Maryland team that they'll be playing in 2 weeks, they're an inspired team, but even that inspiration was only able to muster 3 points this last week. Ohio State will beat these two opponents. It will come down to the final game. It will make it very exciting, very interesting. That's how college football works. The gods have done their thing, and they've put us where we are right now. So it's going to be a big game. In the final game of the season, it's going to be Michigan still with no losses in the conference. It's going to be Ohio State with 1 loss in the conference, and there's going to be a whole lot of everything on the line in that game.
Well, the thing that I think of is when you were saying, like, oh, the football gods, they have it all planned out. It's kind of like what Dave was telling me at B-Dubs, what he does with basketball, where guy gets a foul, probably shouldn't have gotten it. He gets to the foul line, he shoots that shot, and it misses, and Dave goes, ball don't lie. Ball don't lie, man. Ball does not lie. And that's what it almost kind of reminds me of, is like, we are going to get to that game. However, what I look at is if any of these next two opponents can upset Ohio State, it's this week. And this week is the game. I would be not going to say Michigan. Like, I'm not saying that all Michigan State's going to for sure upset them, but I'm saying if Ohio State is susceptible to an upset, it is this week because of Michigan State. They played Michigan tough, and they played Michigan tough at home where they are getting Ohio State. And the last two, they beat that Purdue team that beat Ohio State. They beat that Maryland team on the road. They've only given up a combined 16 points defensively. So I wouldn't be surprised if this next game, I'm not saying Ohio State loses, but if they win, I wouldn't be surprised if it's just as close as the Nebraska game. And after this week, we're still looking at Ohio State like, oh, I don't know. Maybe this is the year that Jim Harbaugh finally gets Urban Meyer's number.
You have talked a little bit, and we've talked a little bit about the potential for Ohio State seeing an upset. Now, while I don't think that Michigan will be upset, I always find it interesting.
You're calling that Rutgers update?
No, I'm
upset. I hear you.
Certainly not. But it seems like at this point in the year where a team's rolling, Michigan will roll right over Rutgers. Get out of our way. We're gonna whoop your booty.
Yeah.
They go to Rutgers and take care of business easily. They come home against Indiana. Everything's going great. Next week is Ohio State. We're going to be good.
And
we're 7-0 in the conference. Look at us. And Indiana is looking right at them. And Indiana, who sits 1-5 right now in the conference, going nowhere. Beats Michigan the week before the Ohio State game. Muddies the water in the playoff scenario, and really could muddy the water in the Big Ten. Not that I'm saying it'll happen, but Indiana has been in this spot before where they've played teams very close. A lot of times they don't get the win. They've been here where Ohio State was at this point a couple of years ago, where it got to one of the last games, 2-3 weeks before the season was over, regular season was over. They almost beat Ohio State. Almost. They didn't, and I know that's the biggest thing. Ohio State still won. But just be careful, because Indiana, for whatever reason, plays inspired football against a good team at the end of the season. To just upset them, ruin their hopes, ruin their season. Indiana says, our season has been absolute crap. We're going to ruin yours, which has been good all year long, and we'll ruin it now.
I don't want to say that you're wrong, because Indiana has been that team to play opponents close, but I just want to say this for this week, and this is the last thing I'll say before I see if you have any final thoughts. If you look at what Vegas is showing you, yes, we're Monday before the game, but if you look at what Vegas is showing us. The lines that come out for these games this week, Michigan, Rutgers, Michigan is a 40-point favorite. Do you want to take a guess at Ohio State is the favorite? How many points Vegas is giving Ohio State against the Spartans in East Lansing?
I'm going to go with 7.5.
4. Ohio State's a 4-point favorite. That means that Vegas is saying a touchdown.
I'm sorry. I'm gonna say that
touchdown at
I'm gonna say that Vegas is wrong. I'm gonna say that Vegas is off on this.
So
one.
Vegas is even saying they are saying that they are that this is probably going to be a touchdown game. Like, it's going to be Michigan State by a touchdown. That even even Ohio State by 3 would still mean if you bet Michigan State, you would get the money. That is what Vegas is telling us. And I'm looking at it and I'm going, I would pick Ohio State. I'm not saying they're going to get upset. I'm spoiling my pick for that one. But this is the week where I look at Ohio State's schedule and I go, if there's another upset before that game, it's this one. And I wouldn't be surprised if Michigan State plays spoiler, Michigan wins the next 2, and we go into that game where it's like, you know what? Jim Harbaugh, doesn't matter if you lose it. You're still going to the Big Ten title game. The only difference is he would still have to win it because then the college football playoff would be on the line. Any final thoughts before we move on into the Big 12?
No, I think we covered it all.
Well, this is where you guys come in. Let us know what you guys think down below in the comment section. Should Ohio State be worried? Did we just talk all this while for nothing? Because no, we shouldn't be worried. They can't beat us in the horseshoe. They can't beat us with our hands tied behind our back. I know we're going to get it all from Buckeye fans, but let us know what you guys think down below in that comment section.